Hello, everybody, and welcome to the United Stand. We have the wonderful Ben Jacobs on again to give us a transfer update, but a takeover update on whether Qatar, Sir Jim. There's a lot of news going around about it. We're going to get an update from Ben, a new update as well, so everyone get excited for that. Also, he's just told me before I went live, which I'm really excited about. He's got a little bit of news on Mason Mount as well, so we'll get some exclusive news on that too. So, Ben, let's get straight into things. I wanted to ask you straight off the bat the first question. It's been reported by Bloomberg, by a Bloomberg journalist that Sir Jim, that his bid potentially could be dead in the water. Is that true? You spoke about it a little bit on our space last night about Sir Jim's bid being a bit of a problem now in the sense of maybe it can't move forward. And is it because of its current form that it's complicated for, the Rain Group to move forward with this Sir Jim bid?
Yeah, I think that's true. Ratcliffe has been flexible in terms of the number of shares that he's prepared to take. But if he ultimately doesn't buy 100% of the football club, then he has a problem because it becomes a deal with the Glazers and the other shareholders are not happy about that. And sources are certainly indicating that there's an impasse at this point. And if the bid stays as is, then Ratcliffe effectively, before he can win Manchester United, has to win the board over, and sources indicate that that is unlikely. So we have to be careful how we phrase this because it has not been communicated to Ineos that they are out the race, nor do they have at this stage any plans to withdraw. And sources are very clear that they are still being engaged with. So that's the Ineos perspective. And I think that's why the excellent David Hellier, who's a good friend of mine, didn't headline with Ineos out, because there is a feeling that the structure would have to change, otherwise they will be out. So that's obviously looking less positive from Ineos's point of view, and we now have to wait and see how the group move. But speaking to sources within the group, both last night and this morning, they made it abundantly clear that it's not been communicated to them that they're out the race. But I think the big shift, which is significant, is from Qatar's perspective, they now see it as a 50-50, if you like, or a head-to-head between them winning and purchasing 100% of the club, or a no sale with some financing around it. Whereas maybe 2 months ago, certainly after April the 28th and before they placed their fourth and fifth bid, Qatar were more looking at it as, are they going to pick Ratcliffe and stay, or are they going to pick Qatar and go? Now it looks like Qatar view themselves as the only credible suitor in the race. And people will presume that means they're going to win, but obviously no sale is a possibility. And what's interesting when I talk to sources is the Glazers have looked at the new Club World Cup in particular, and they're thinking if Manchester United can get into that regularly and also into Champions League, they want to project more value onto the club. So we can either read that as they'll go back to 9-2 Foundation and say we want more. And then if the magic numbers hit, I've said many times, all six Glazers are determined sellers. But maybe they're looking at the Club World Cup and other income opportunities and still feeling like if they hang on to the club for a little bit longer and put some financing into it, then they'll be able to get more out of it at a later date. And of course, if they do that, there'll be absolute uproar and carnage, and Manchester United fans will probably be standing on the pitch as well as outside the club megastore to try and stop that eventuality from happening. And we have to take that very seriously, because obviously if the Glazers choose to stay and the fans effectively disown them and the football club, then it's all very well saying the value of the football club is going to go up. But let's see how that actually affects the enterprise value, because of course it's going to keep it extraordinarily low. So Qatar feel it's them or no sale. And from Ratcliffe's point of view, something will now have to change. Otherwise, they are definitely in a position where they cannot win in their current form.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. And what you said there is they cannot win on the current form, which is obviously huge, because we've seen this Ratcliffe bid been going around for, obviously, it feels like some time now. And if in its current form it can't win, at this moment in time, how big is the pushback from the minority shareholders on that? Do you think Ratcliffe's in a position where he might change his bid, or do you think maybe then, like you said, it's becoming a little bit more apparent now that the Glazers might seek some other source of financing to, potentially stay at the club? How do you see this changing when it coming into the future, and how is Ratcliffe going to handle this? Do you know?
The other financing is interesting because a lot of the groups that are in the mix for that financing are in the dark. And we've heard a lot of names like Elliott and Carlisle. My understanding is that those groups have not had any significant communication for quite some time. Now, financing is different to minority investment, because if you're only financing, then even with the Credit Suisse collapse, it's unlikely the terms will change. So it is logical that you can kind of make a financing offer to the Glazers and it just stays there in the background, which is why less engagement is needed. And they haven't discounted that, but that would be one possibility, to say they're putting the club on the market at a later date and they're taking financing. But it would be so unpopular that it's hard to see how that will work and still have a relationship between the Glazers and the football club and the fan base, which is already arguably not repairable. Even if they turn around and say we're putting billions and billions and billions into the club, we're clearing the debt ourselves, etc., it's hard to see them winning anybody over at any point, regardless of what happens on the football field. And surely, eventually, they'll realise that. Otherwise, they're quite clearly asking for big trouble. But only the Glazers ultimately know the answer to that question. And then I think with Ratcliffe, we just have to point out that he's always said he'll be flexible. And this is why we can say that bid is in a far weaker position. But until it's communicated to them, or they communicate that they're out, we do still have to technically refer to them as in the process. And of course, the Glazers love that, because they can try and create this competitive tension, which has been a big thing within the process. With the other shareholders, and I've spoken to many of them, they are quite prepared to group together. They're quite prepared to gang up effectively on the Ratcliffe bid. And they've made their feelings known, not just verbally, but formally, as I understand it as well. And that's significant, because there's a whole series of approvals that are needed. And the approval process is slightly different for both bids, but some of the things they have to get approved are the same. And one of them is board approval. And if Ratcliffe can't get board approval, he cannot own Manchester United, even if the Glazers would like him to own Manchester United. And that's significant. So Ratcliffe now either has to back out or be told he's out, or if he continues in the race, he actually has to win one thing before he potentially wins the race for Manchester United. And that is either a battle with the other shareholders and potentially a legal battle with the other shareholders. And that is significant and at the moment, very possibly insurmountable. So again, flexible, which means that he could change the form of the bid to try and get around this, or he could win over those shareholders. But as things stand, it looks like there's only really two concrete options: Qatar or no sale. And then Ratcliffe has to change something to come back into the race.
Well, that is a really significant update, obviously. And I think a lot of people will take that as, you know, obviously, as you just said then, Ratcliffe can change his bid, but it's a huge update considering with just weeks ago, we were talking about these two, you know, bidders still being very much in the race. And we actually have a super chat in from Robert McCormack saying, what do they need to change / will they change? I think that's obviously Ineos and Sir Jim's bid. What do they need to change in order for, you know, the boards, basically what you said, the minority shareholders to kind of approve this bid from being, you know, for the takeover to happen if the Glazers did decide to go with the Ineos takeover route?
Well, there'd be two options. They either have to engage and then pacify, or obviously if they were to change, they have to potentially allow those other shareholders a piece of the pie. And I think that there's so many variables here, because to be honest, if what was happening was just a tiny slice of the Glazers shares being taken like minority investment, then the other shareholders probably wouldn't mind. So Ratcliffe can pivot in a variety of ways. First thing to do, if he's happy with his bid, even if it stands now a lower chance of success, is engage and try and pacify. But then if he can't, because there's an offer for 100% of the club on the table, he might have to go down that route. And Ratcliffe's always said that he only wants control. He doesn't want to have to spend that extra billion to buy 100% of the club. But if the number is so good, as far as the shareholders are concerned, that they want effectively a slice, and they believe that the best deal for the football club is actually the one from Qatar, then Ratcliffe may be in a position where he either just doesn't win because the Qatar bid is better, or if he wants to win, he has to effectively go head to head with Qatar and change the structure. And I think at that point, Ratcliffe would probably pull out, because it's never been indicated on the Ratcliffe side by sources that he would take 100% of the club. And you can look at that many ways. Does he not have the money? Does he not want to spend the money? Does he not think it's worth spending the money? Because once you've got control of the football club, does it really matter? If you've got 69% or 50% even in control, does it really matter about the other shares as far as control and day to day? And Ratcliffe's in this because he wants Manchester United and he wants to control the football club, whereas Jassim wants 100% simply because as a asset, Qatar believe that not only is that the cleanest transaction, but once they've got 100%, they can obviously shape it in a variety of different ways and possibly use the club for different things comparative to what Ineos are looking for. So it's fascinating, really. And I understand that fans are frustrated, and I understand that everybody just wants every single journalist at the moment to say Qatar have won or Qatar will win. And I'd love to be able to tell those that want to hear that exactly that, or at least be able to tell you that the Glazers are definitely going in some capacity. But again, we have to be relatively responsible here. And I have my own personal opinion from talking to the groups. But it's also interesting that when we appear to point towards Qatar positivity, but add they're skeptical, that's coming from Qatar sources. That's not coming from games. That's not coming from people at Manchester United. That's not coming from Ineos. Of course, we're talking to all sides, bankers, experts, and so on. But people deep within the Qatar group are, yes, growing in positivity, but adding they're still skeptical because this is how the Glazers have ran this process. They've made absolutely sure that they've led everybody to the finishing line somehow and astonishingly without showing their hand.
Yeah, it's been a huge journey, and I know you were there saying that, you know, everyone wants a definitive answer. Be careful what you say. Your 10-second clip might get clipped up and put all over Twitter. But I know what you mean when people are just so desperate now to kind of hear the outcome. One last thing I kind of did want to touch on when it comes to the update of the takeover, and I know again you're not going to be able to give a definitive answer on this, but in your opinion, a lot of people now, especially when you look at, for example, you know, Twitter is a huge news source. When you look at Twitter, when you look in the news, a lot of people have stopped talking about the fact that, you know, the Glazers could stay and, you know, Qatar and Sir Jim both might not win this. And it might be something completely different. How likely would you say it is? Or have you heard anything in regards to potentially, you know, the Glazers staying and getting that financing elsewhere from what you talked about before? Is that still quite a viable option that could happen?
I mean, no sale has always been a possibility, but again, there'll be so much outrage. It's hard to see how that would be practically viable. So they'd have to come forwards with no sale and probably give a clear guideline as to when they're relisting. And it's not like eBay, you can't just put it on the next day. So it would probably be a couple of years down the line before you would consider relisting the club. But also they'd have to outline what they're going to do. They can't stay and not spend, so they're going to have to borrow. So it's that word again, borrowing. And then when you look at the debt on the football club, it's absolutely ridiculous that Manchester United, arguably the biggest brand in football and is heading the right direction on the football side under Erik ten Hag, has owners that not only have racked up debt, but have taken $1 billion out when a club like Manchester City have put $1 billion in. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. And it's demoralizing. And then shock horror, Manchester United are winning trebles. And okay, Manchester United got a trophy in Champions League and it was a great season. But for the second season, for a different reason under Erik ten Hag, the summer's been overshadowed. And this is why there's frustration, particularly amongst the groups, because when this process first started, they at least thought they'd be in by the end of the season.
Have you heard of frustration from Erik ten Hag?
Well, I mean, ten Hag's frustrated because you always want to know who your boss is, right? And you would also assume as an employer, the football club, not just Ten Hag, that you would be given a clear indication, at least privately. But the Glazers have made sure that they've kept everything in such a close circle that there are even people at the football club that have not got clarity. So what I would say about Ten Hag is that it's not true that the takeover has to happen for Manchester United to spend. There's a budget there of about 100 to 120 million. And they can move for one or two players. I think we discussed this last time. I know we hear rumours that somehow takeover needs to be done, then they can spend, but it's simply not true. And the takeover could be done in terms of a winner today, but still weeks away from actually the keys being handed over. And as a consequence, the window might be near shut or shut. So Manchester United can move. And they will try and sign 2 players, as we discussed, I think, last time, for around 100 to 120 million early in the window. So that's the good news. But Ten Hag is frustrated because you want things to get going. You want to know whether, if the debt is cleared, there's extra money. You want to know whether the ownership group, if a new one comes in, can find a way of giving you more. You want to know if Ineos are there with a list of football people, Paul Mitchell is one of them, and Qatar are there with a list of football people and also ambassadors, by the way. They're talking to some ex-players as well. If they've each got plans, when's this 100-day transition going to start? And is there going to be a new football director? And are people at the football club in the current hierarchy going to stay or go? Everyone's anxious. And, you know, the thing about those Manchester meetings, from what both groups say, is that the departments at Manchester United were almost pitching themselves. It was a bit like an open house. So it wasn't a case of the groups coming in and saying, nice to meet you, here's what we want to do, this is our pitch. It was very much the groups listening to departments, trying to sell themselves in the best possible light to get maximum value. And obviously every head of that department, at the back of their mind, is probably thinking, am I staying or am I going? And am I staying under Qatar? Am I staying under No Sale? Am I staying under Ineos? Am I staying under Carlisle or Elliott? And until there's clarity, nobody's sure of their jobs. So it's a very uncertain time at Manchester United Football Club. And this is where the frustration comes from. And obviously Erik ten Hag is a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I can understand the frustration, especially from fans, but also, you know, working within something like that, it is frustrating, especially when, you know, managers, not only is he wanting to plan for this summer, but he's going to be wanting to plan for next season and so on. It is frustrating kind of having that up in the air. But thank you very much for the ownership update on that, on the takeover update of who potentially could be the owners of Manchester United and where we stand now. Super insightful as always. I want to talk about Mason Mount, as we did speak about this a little bit before we started off the show. And you did say you had some new news on Mason Mount. So can you tell us what you know at this moment in time?
Yeah, Chelsea and Manchester United have always kept in contact. There's been no walk away, as I reported on the night that the bid was actually rejected. And the old part of the news is Manchester United want to stick to their position. And at the same time, you have Chelsea's counter offer, which is out there as well, which is 58 million plus 7. And Manchester United quite clearly are not going to pay that. But the new bits of news are that Chelsea have become more flexible in the last few hours, and they are willing to reach a compromise. And on top of that, internally at Chelsea, they've even started looking at other potential replacements as well. So Chelsea are firmly in selling mode, and all parties still want this deal done. So Mason Mount remains a top priority, arguably the number one priority at this stage for Manchester United, and Chelsea are prepared to bend. So Manchester United are starting their discussions around structure, not number. In other words, it's a 50 plus 5 offer. They'd still like it to be a 55 million offer. But can the structure of that offer be changed in any way, but still around 55? And Chelsea are prepared to go from 58 plus 7 down a little bit, more around the 60 million mark. Now, whether Manchester United will go up by 5 million remains to be seen. These talks are ongoing. We probably won't know until later today or maybe tomorrow. But there's a real optimism on all sides that there is still a deal there to be had. And at this stage, we'll see, because obviously Manchester United are going to be quite bullish. And if Chelsea say 61, 62, 63, Manchester United will probably say, well, now you're messing us around. But the parties have never left the table. And I would still say that there is a relatively high likelihood still that in the next few days, Mason Mount ends up as a Manchester United player.
That'd be super exciting, especially considering all of the, you know, news we've had recently. We've had Spurs signing 2 players, which, you know, Spurs are doing business before us. We've seen Liverpool have already signed McAllister. City have obviously signed Kovacic. They're looking at doing other deals. Arsenal are moving super quick. So, you know, to get a player over the line coming up to next week, it's not next week, coming up to the pre-season tour is really, really important for us. Nextly, I had a super chat in from Aussie Devil saying, what's the deal with Rasmus Højlund? Is the deal still on the table? Is there anything you know about Rasmus Højlund? Is he still up there as like a priority for Manchester United in terms of a striker this summer?
For sure, the problem with Højlund is sort of price, and obviously Manchester United will find this if they seriously enter the race for Moises Caicedo as well. And I think that is the problem again of financial fair play and the budget rather than only uncertainty over ownership. But we know that even if Mason Mount comes in, and the same with Onana, Manchester United's key positional target is a traditional number 9. So they're going to have to find some kind of solution there. And Højlund ticks a lot of boxes because he's got a young profile. He's got a high ceiling. The only downside is that you're not getting the same kind of finished product as with a Victor Osimhen or a Harry Kane or even a Dusan Vlahovic and other targets that Manchester United have looked at. He did score 9 goals last season for Atalanta in the league and 10 in all competitions, but that was in over 30 games. So then to jump from there to Premier League and expect him to get 10, 15 plus goals in his first season is naturally a big ask. And then when you look at the price, and when Atalanta sources speak of it, they're hoping for 75 or 80 million. I think Manchester United's perspective would definitely be 10 or 15 million less, if not more, partly because of budget and partly, again, because that's a massive amount of money to pay for a player, even though the potential is sky high. So that one's obviously a player that Erik ten Hag knows very well. Manchester United are tracking. It is a real possibility. We can definitely say that he is firmly on the radar, but there's other options too. And I would still, again, keep an eye on Vlahovic, who will be a bit later in the window, and Chelsea and Manchester United have looked at him. And on top of that, we know about all the other targets that have been correctly and widely reported. I'm not going to go into all of them, other than to say that Kane is pretty much dead at this point, unless Daniel Levy changes his mind about selling to a rival. And for all of the annoyance over Manchester United's lack of movement, they actually were quite smart on this one, because they went early before the window even opened, and they ensured that they didn't get messed around, and they came away from their exploration on that deal knowing, of course, that they want the player, and if they could get the player, they'd sign Harry Kane tomorrow. But they don't believe they can, even if they offer above 100 million. They don't believe that Daniel Levy wants to sell to a rival. So that would be interesting, because obviously if Bayern start coming in as is expected, I ran an exclusive yesterday that Bayern's second offer is expected to be in the region of 80 million pounds. And if Bayern make any progress, Manchester United may turn around and say, hang on a minute, we still think Kane wants Premier League over Bundesliga, and the price is lower than maybe we were exploring. So what's going on? But this is just Daniel Levy all over. If he doesn't want to sell to a Premier League rival, he won't sell to a Premier League rival. And Manchester United didn't get a feeling with Kane that he would kind of acrimoniously drive the move with any kind of public comments or statements or forcing his way out of respect to Spurs. So without the player doing that, with a sky-high price, with Manchester United's financial situation, and with Daniel Levy, Kane at the moment for Manchester United is unfortunately near impossible.
Yeah, Daniel Levy, the fact he thinks we're a rival makes me laugh. Stick to mid-table. But no, I completely get the update on that. And as much as I would love Kane, and I would love you to come here and say, you know, it could happen, I think Bayern Munich are obviously strong in that. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes if Bayern Munich do start to heat up with the negotiations with that. But we've got one super chat in from Zach saying, what is the goalkeeper situation like at the moment? Is there anything you can tell us about Onana? A lot of Italian reports reporting that this deal is getting close, but we've not really had much until today out on the reports from the English media, but it's now heating up saying, you know, Manchester United are highly exploring this deal. With De Gea, do you think, what's the situation with him and Onana? Do you think De Gea will leave? Do you think Onana will come in? Do you think United will bid for him?
Remember last time I said very clearly that Manchester United, to my understanding, were always looking for a number one, whether De Gea stays or leaves. So ultimately, De Gea knows that, and he ultimately has to make up his mind on the contract based upon that. And is he prepared to either fight for his place or lose his place and still be at the football club? But obviously, Manchester United don't yet have Onana or anybody else. So this is the kind of games of that transfer, and it's a bit of who blinks first. Because, of course, if Manchester United don't get another goalkeeper in now, then it's not ideal either to enter into pre-season with De Gea gone. And this is where time is running out. This is where we're getting a lot of conflicting narratives. But on Onana, Inter are going to have to sell. That's the first thing to say. They're going to have to sell somebody, I should say, because their financial situation doesn't allow them to just keep on to all of their stars. And I may have mentioned this last time, when they didn't sell Milan Skriniar to PSG either last summer or in January, they lost around 60 million euros because they wanted 70, 75. And by not making that sale, he'll now join PSG on a free. And as a consequence, Inter are out of pocket on what could have been very welcome money from that deal. So Inter saying nobody's really for sale, especially Lautaro Martinez or players like Bastoni, Barella, someone's got to go. And even with Brozovic, no guarantee yet that he'll move to Saudi Arabia, even though talks are advancing there. And that's, I think, 23 million. So Onana could be the one that they're going to have to take a fee for. And I also don't buy the Inter valuation either, talking to sources. So numbers being put out there out of Italy when I speak to sources on that side are a lot closer to 50 plus million, somewhere in the region of 70 million euros, which would be even closer to 60 million pounds. But my understanding is that most in the market believe that Onana will go for less than that, perhaps more around 50, 55 million euros, which is kind of what, 40 to 45 million quid. And I think if a deal's there to be had at that value, I come back again to what I said before. Manchester United want two players early in the window. I've said this many times. Rough budget, 100, 115, 20 million. So Mount plus Onana is possible within that budget. And there's absolutely no doubt that Manchester United are exploring this deal. I'm not aware at the time we're recording this of any offer. But what is true is that they are very keen on making a bid, and their efforts will have to be ramped up even quicker if De Gea doesn't stay, because otherwise they're entering into the beginning of pre-season with complete uncertainty over the goalkeeper position. So it is definitely one to watch over the coming days.
Yeah, and when clubs know you don't have a goalkeeper, they can drive the price up as well because you're desperate for one. So it's important to probably get that deal going quickly. I would love that deal to happen. But lastly, before we wrap things up, I've said last question like 3 times now. It's same as the first time round, Ben. I just wanted to ask you, if the Mason Mount deal does go ahead, which we both seem confident it probably will, does that mean Man United are completely out of the Moises Caicedo race then? Do you just do due to budgets, I would imagine?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say confident on the deal so much as optimistic. I know there doesn't seem much difference between those, but the talks are ongoing. And I think that there is that likelihood that Mount will go to Manchester United. And should that happen and a deal is reached, then I think Manchester United won't enter the race for Moises Caicedo, only because the priority is to save some budget for that traditional number 9. And then we've already spoken about the goalkeeper situation. So if they spend 100 odd million, more than 100 million, in fact, on Mount plus a more defensive-minded midfielder like Caicedo, then it's very hard to see them getting the traditional number 9 and the goalkeeper that they want across the window, given financial fair play. I also think, and I know it might not be what Manchester United fans want to hear, that this whole Caicedo thing is still an element of gamesmanship. It's true that Manchester United have had a historical interest in Caicedo, and it is also normal to explore the terms of the deal. But much like Declan Rice, we heard Manchester United would somehow enter and make cash plus player. And we're hearing similar things now around Caicedo as well. And I think that given Caicedo popped up just hours after the rejected bid for Mason Mount, there's an element perhaps of truth because of the historical interest, but it's a whole lot more games. And I think that if Manchester United get Mount, then they are highly unlikely to pursue Caicedo. And if Manchester United don't get Mount, even if they wanted Caicedo, I still think that they will struggle to get Caicedo because at minimum it's an £80 million deal.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. When I think about it, 120 million, it's not really that much money to go at what we need in the window. So player sales are going to be key. But look, Ben, thank you so much for coming on. I've heard your phone buzzing. Hopefully you can give us some more updates. I'm sure your sources are coming in for you, giving you some more updates. So if anybody wants to kind of follow what you'll be reporting, which I suggest everybody does, because really good updates from you. I have you on Twitter myself, and I really enjoy reading them. Where can they find you on Twitter?
Well, Twitter's at Jacobs Ben. Of course, CBS, both our website and our TV coverage is another part of what I do. So if you're in America, you can obviously follow all of that as well. But for the transfer stuff, you can also follow me on Twitter at Jacobs Ben. You can follow me via TikTok and Instagram as well at Ben David Jacobs, although at the moment that's mostly dog photos rather than transfer or takeover news. But that might change over the summer.
Yeah, hopefully we'll start seeing some pictures as well incorporated in. We love it, Ben. But thank you so much. And yeah, everyone get onto that. I'll be going. Well, I mean, I'm already onto everything. But thank you for coming on, Ben. Really good updates as per usual. And we'll be hoping to get you back on. Hopefully, sometime you'll be able to join me inside the studio. So that'll be good.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. Hope to get to Manchester and meet you and all of the team. Keep up the good work. And hopefully, finally, I'll be able to give you some full categorical clarity in terms of a takeover winner soon. I know it's frustrating for fans. I always see the chat. I empathise with Manchester United fans. Great club, great fan base, and fair play to the fans as well for sort of driving their position publicly and vocally, because that's a big part of all of this, as it was with the Super League as well. And I'll just say what I always say. We would love as journalists to be 100% categorical and just tell you X has won. And I know that people want that to be Qatar, at least in the chat, but
majority, yeah.
Even if I was 99% sure of a winner, I would still not, nor would any journalist be releasing that unless we were 100%, not with a takeover. I know like transfers are more, maybe this will be the next step, or maybe this will happen. But I'm just aware that if I say today, it's very likely Qatar will win, then that will blow up and the stock price will blow up and the fan base will positively blow up. And this has been a process of so many twists and turns. We do just have to urge a tiny bit of caution here, as I've said all along, even if that irritates the heck out of the chats that are watching this interview.
Everyone will be happy when it's finally done. Hopefully, if we get the outcome we want. If not, then oh God, I don't know what's going to happen. But whatever happens, we'll definitely have you on and be chatting to you again. But thanks, Ben, for everything, and we'll see you soon, hopefully, with more updates.
Look forward to it. All the best, everyone. Take care.